So when you're doing the wire riveting, you want to make sure that you choose the appropriate size for the rivet. If you get too small, it's really hard to work towards the end, and if you get too large, it's really hard to get a hole that big drilled in metal, especially if you're using smaller pieces. We'll switch to a hand drill if you end up using something so large rather than your drill press. So if I were going to rivet these two together, I'm going to decide where I need to put the hole on the top sheet, and I would take a Sharpie marker and mark that and use my all-in center hole punch and get that drilled. Once that's drilled, then I'm going to go ahead, so I have 3 holes on here, then I'm going to go ahead and line up where I drill on the base piece. Now I can't take these two over to the drill press and hold them both down and drill, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and take a Sharpie marker and align these up and just put a little hole right in the middle there and right in the middle there, and then that's what I'm going to use for my my center hole punch and get those holes drilled. I've already pre-drilled those. So if I were going to rivet these, I am going to could rivet them this way, or I could line up rivets this way and go from there. Now your holes can be a design element. So what I have here is I'm going to go ahead and rivet the top 2, or the bottom 2, depending on your perspective. So the bottom 2 right here, and then I may or may not have anything that could just be a design element in there. So I line these up. Once I have all the holes lined up, then I need to make sure that I have the right length of wire to come in here. So the wire itself I actually measured, and when you are measuring to drill for your drill bits, make sure that you're using a millimeter gauge, you're not just eyeballing it. So if I decide I need 14 gauge wire, I'm going to use that millimeter gauge and figure out how wide that is, and then I'm going to go ahead and test out my drill bits and find a drill bit that matches that. So once I have those holes drilled, I'm ready to cut my wire. And you have a couple of different types of wire cutters in the studio, but I suggest you use the flush cutters, and the flush cutters have a green handle on them, and what happens is the edge right here is going to leave a flat surface. So when I'm going in here to cut this wire right here, you'll notice that it kind of comes to a point right there. That was the non-flush cutter side of the wire cutters right here. So I also suggest that you take a flat file and you file that flat before you start. You can do it afterwards, but it makes it harder to line up. So you're going to file this flat. You can either use the large hand file or you can use a diamond file. And then once that's flat, you're going to line these up, and you're going to go ahead and put the wire through both of them. And the idea is that the wire is going to be just slightly bigger than the thickness of the materials that you're riveting together. So I usually suggest just putting it down against the table and taking a Sharpie marker and marking where that is. And then once you have, and if you have a Sharpie that works, it's always nice. Once you have that mark right there, you're going to come in and give it a millimeter or 2 and cut it from there. You can always trim it later. This part gets a little tricky. So if I cut this direction, this side of it's going to be flat. If I cut this direction, this side of the wire is going to be flat. Now it's tricky with these wires because they like to fly around the room. So once you've lined it up, you're going to go ahead and just put it into your box to cut it. Make sure you're wearing your safety glasses, as always. And I would need to do 2 of those. So again, so I take these and I'll put them on tape if I have a couple that I'm thinking about using so that they don't get lost. And these have already been filed. Now if you have a piece of wire, so I have this piece that I just cut, and you realize that it needs a little help on the end because it's not flush, and you have enough length. Take some chain pliers, some needle nose pliers, and gently hold on to that to file because it's going to be, there's not a lot of way that you're going to hold that with your hands. Do that. You can also turn the file upside down. Remember, the pushing stroke is the cutting stroke, so you'd want to bring this wire back towards yourself to do that. So you can file that flat. And then you're going to test it, and you're going to test it inside of here. And the tricky part is if there's any kind of texture on here or it's not fitting flat, you can get a false read on that. So I'm going to go ahead and take one of these guys. I like to jump around on you. So I'm going to go ahead and that's the back side. I'm going to go ahead and place that on top of it. And then my finger is kind of holding that in place. So I double check and make sure that, again, I want to have about 1/2 to 1 millimeters of distance on either side of this to go ahead and make this rivet work. So you've got, in just a second I'm going to show you the hammering on this. You've got a circular rivet right here, so this is kind of enlarged, and then your piece is out here. And the idea is that you're going to flare your wire so that it spreads out, and you're going to do that on both sides so that it holds those two pieces of metal. And the more equal you can flare that wire out, the better that rivet and the cleaner that rivet is going to look like. So the idea is if you take a bordering hammer or goldsmith hammer, you're going to make your hammer strokes like that, and you're just going to keep doing cross sections and hammering down so that you're boom, 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 boom. So as I'm transferring this to the steel block, I want to make sure that it doesn't come out. So I'm just going to slide this right here. And it's through both. And again, the two different types of hammers. So you want the bordering hammer right here. This is a huge face for this little teeny rivet. So I'm going to switch to the goldsmith hammer, which is a little bit smaller. And again, based on that drawing I just showed you, you're going to be hammering straight down. And then what I'd suggest is start with a plus sign or an X and then make your way around it. So you hold that in place. And you want to come straight down on that. I know it's hard to see from this, so I'm going to tap it once here. And then I'm going to switch it. I do not hammer very much, and this is where you can lose your rivet as well. So I'm going to put it back down this way. And it will be pretty loose for a little bit until you kind of flare that. And I'm sliding, and then see how I didn't have to hold that rivet in. And you'll notice you'll get some marks in here with your rivet. I know it's kind of hard to tell. I don't know if we can zoom in on that. And then I came in at an angle, so it tends to flare out right there. So again, you want to make sure that you have, this is coming straight down on your rivet. And you can either turn your piece or you can turn your angle in relation to it, depending on your workstation. And you just keep flipping. And if you want to make a rivet that kind of hinges like this, one of the tricks you can do is you can slide some paper in there before you do this, and then remove the paper, so once you get that in, it will move. Or if you don't want it to move, you just keep hammering until it's not moving. Now, since I have another rivet that I'm going to do on here, I would probably put that rivet in first before I clean that up. Now, the other thing, after you finish doing your hammering and it's the tightness that you're looking for, you're going to use the flat side of that, and you can come in, and then that just really nicely burnishes that top. Be careful because you can also damage your metal. This is a steel hammer, so that if this hammer hits your metal, you might have to do some cleaning up with the surface work there. So I've got my wire rivet right here and the possibility to do another one, and then let's take a look at how to do the tube riveting.